and serve as a member of the Almighty's Guard of Honor. We know that they will proceed on their journey like the refrain in Michael Junkus's On Eagle's Wings. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hands. And at this first encounter with the Almighty, all of us here know that they will stand at attention, they will salute, and they will proudly sound off with airborne all the way, sir.
Lieutenant Colonel Stan McChrystal, Commander, the 2nd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment.
The soldiers who went to Pope Air Force Base on March 23rd were as diverse as America itself, ranging in age from 18 to over 40, in rank from private to captain, from novice jumper to master parachutist, and representing nearly every race, religion, and corner of our nation. It would therefore seem an unlikely quirk of fate that would bring them together at an airfield in North Carolina, this collection of individuals, each so different, to be tried by fire. But there were no individuals at Green Ramp last Wednesday. For when tragedy struck, there were no old men, no young men, no captains, no sergeants, no privates, no cooks, no mechanics, no infantrymen. Hometown, race, and religion were irrelevant. For like their predecessors in 1942, they shared a bond which evaporated their differences. They were paratroopers, normally great. In adversity, they are magnificent. And it is this greatness and worth of every paratrooper which makes our loss so painful. Each an irreplaceable treasure. Our hearts will continue to ache for each fallen comrade as we struggle to adhere to the ideals and standards they set so clearly. But the depth of our loss does not mean we are beaten. As long as young men and women volunteer to jump, when no one would question the choice of an easier path, we cannot lose. When one paratrooper shelters another with his body at the cost of his own life, we cannot lose. A unit where badly injured paratroopers return again and again to the flames to save their comrades, and now bravely face the long recovery from their sacrifice, cannot lose. As long as there are young wives who selflessly ignore their own anguish over injuries to husbands and friends to comfort and care for others in what they feel is greater need, we have a family which cannot be beaten. As long as our leaders, our comrades, and our communities rally around us in times of need, we cannot lose. One need only look around us today, to those who carry on, to know that when called, victory is certain. Today's ceremony is a fitting tribute to the paratroopers whose loss we mourn so deeply. We struggle, but will never be worthy of or deserve such soldiers. For me, I remain in awe of them and forever in their debt.
Lieutenant Colonel Lloyd Austin, Commander, the 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment.
We are here today to pay tribute to our fallen comrades who have so faithfully served their country and each other. Now, during the past week, the citizens of this great country have been amazed and overwhelmed by the countless acts of bravery and heroism on the part of the young men and women of this division. Acts such as those of Staff Sergeant Doc Sanchez, who, when the crash occurred, did not run away from the fireball. Instead, Sergeant Sanchez ran towards the fireball in an effort to warn his comrades and to help to remove them from harm's way. There are those among us who have testified that the heroic actions of Staff Sergeant Sanchez saved their lives. He gave his life so that others may live. Acts such as those of Staff Sergeant Price of Albany, Georgia. It has been substantiated that when the crash occurred, Sergeant Price ran toward one of his fellow soldiers, pushed her to the ground, and covered her with his body. When the blast subsided, Sergeant Price's last words were to the effect of, "Get yourself to a doctor." He also sacrificed his life so that another may live. Acts such as those of Staff Sergeant White, who initially was unharmed by the effects of the blast, but subsequently received second-degree burns from trying to help extinguish the flames of some of his comrades. And acts such as those of Captain Jim Mingus, whose first and only concern was for the welfare of his soldiers. He quickly began to attempt to organize evacuation efforts following the blast. He refused to leave his men and finally had to be dragged away from the scene because he was badly burned and in need of medical attention. And as for the men and women who were badly injured, the first question that they posed to their leadership was not, "What are you going to do for me?" Rather, it was, "Will I be able to continue to serve?" This reminds us of President John F. Kennedy's famous quote of, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." These stellar men and women have taken the values embodied in this phrase to yet another level. These acts of heroism and patriotism have served to shock the citizens of this great nation. However, they come as no surprise to the members of this division. For you see, we have been with them during the most challenging of times. We have been with them on the live fire exercises at 3 a.m. in the cold and rain, and witnessed soldiers who have thrown themselves on barbed wire so that their comrades could jump over them and continue the mission. They truly have an unconditional love for their comrades and epitomize the concept of selfless service. As the American people have watched this unfold, our citizens have no doubt asked themselves the question, where do we get people like this from? And how do they develop such values? The answer to these questions are simple. These young men and women come from places like Anchorage, Alaska, Columbia, South Carolina, Honolulu, Hawaii, and Albany, Georgia. They come from affluent families, middle-class families, and families in need. Now, having met many of the family members of these paratroopers in the past few days, I can easily say that their strong sense of value, or their strong value system and unconditional love for their country did not originate at Fort Bragg, but rather it began at home. Because we often tend to focus on the bad things in our society, we quite often forget about the quality of people in hometown America. As the old saying goes, the acorn does not fall far from the tree. These men have not given their lives in vain. They have served to clearly illustrate to the remainder of the world that which is plainly obvious to us, that the men and women in this division are without equal. You know, the citizens of this country quite often wonder how their tax dollars are being spent in terms of defense spending. This display of valor and human sacrifice served to illustrate to all that those monies are being spent well in the development of young men and women. What they have demonstrated here this week cannot be measured in dollars. They are the best and therefore deserve the very best. To our fallen comrades, we salute you and vow to carry on in the spirit of excellence in your memory. Should the call to arms to defend the ideals of this nation come tomorrow, we stand ready to answer it. To the families of our fallen comrades, we share the heavy burden of sorrow with you, and please know that you will always, always be considered a part of our family.
Chaplain Haberek will now present our scripture reading.